Well, hello, and welcome to my kitchen, and thanks for watching Recipe of Love. This series is about cooking, but unlike other series, it is going to incorporate a little bit something extra. In this show, we're also going to talk about issues of faith and problems that we all encounter every day. And so with that, let's begin. Today, we're going to make bread. Not a fancy bread, but a simple recipe. But like all good recipes, the fun and the experience is making the recipe. It's kind of like the Bible. When we read Mark 12, verses 30 through 31, Jesus is talking to some scribes, and he's telling them what is important in life. And he says, "You shall love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. That is the first commandment. The second is this: thou shalt love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." Very simple recipe. Love God with all your body, all your mind, all your soul, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Simple recipe. But the experience of making that recipe is what makes it special. And so with that in mind, let's begin. And I'd like to introduce a special guest, my friend Greg. Hey Greg.
Hello Josh.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Cool. Well, we're going to make some bread. You ready?
Let's make bread.
All right. So I'm going to read the recipe and you get out the ingredients and put them in the bowl.
Let's see. All right. Specs here.
All right. Let's start with 4 cups of all-purpose flour.
I can do that. That is a cup.
That is a cup. And then while you're doing that, I'm going to get 1.5 cups of warm water. Now you want to make sure the water is warm because we're going to put yeast in here. And yeast likes warm, but it doesn't like hot. And so we want our little friends to grow and be happy. And so while he's doing the flour,
We'll be here all day trying to pour flour.
all right, so we're going to add 1 3/4 teaspoon of salt, which you'll do after that, and then 1/2 teaspoon of active yeast. And you can go a little bit more if you like, just to make sure it all gets in there.
And 4.
Good.
And what was the next? You said something about salt?
Yep. 1 3/4 teaspoon of salt. Like I said, a simple recipe. Salt, flour, yeast, and water. Stir the yeast up really well. Now, Greg and I go to the same church. What church do we go to, Greg?
We go to North Decatur United Methodist Church.
And where is that located?
That is at the corner of Church Street, North Decatur Road in Decatur.
And how would you describe our congregation, Greg?
We have probably the most diverse congregation that I've ever been aware of, or I've definitely been involved with, because it's the only church I've ever been involved with.
How is it diverse?
It's diverse in any way you can possibly think. Political leanings, culture, race. We've got just a tremendously diverse group of people. And for all intents and purposes, we all get along pretty well.
And why do you think that is, Greg?
You know, it's just a common idea that we're all God's people and all are welcome.
I agree with that. I think that what's amazing about our church is you watch all these different people try to harmonize together. And some days work better than others, but everybody is there for the same purpose. And I think you can see it when you walk in the doors. And Greg and I are a great example of that. There's a lot of things that we don't agree on, political and otherwise. But there's something that binds us together that is more important than politics or many other things. Would you agree with that, Greg?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
So we have another 4 minutes to wait for this yeast to settle in. And I wanted to ask you, do you have any favorite verses in the Bible that deal with bread? Since it comes
Well, I don't know about verses, but stories. Obviously, the bread and wine at the Last Supper. the bread being the embodiment of Jesus Christ, the loaves and the fishes, 4 loaves and 4 fish, and they fed millions, or thousands, a multitude, I think is the term that they used. But between bread and water, throughout the Bible, there's a lot of references to both. But I think the most important one is the body, the bread being the symbolism of the body of Christ. And we celebrate that with communion in the sacrament of communion on a regular basis.
I think that's true. And then also in the Lord's Prayer, we talk about, give us our daily bread. And, I think it's interesting that it's the most basic thing, and it's mentioned over and over again in the Bible. And I think there's a reason for that. And I think it's one of the fun things about making bread is thinking about those things, because it makes you realize how you don't need a fancy feast to get nourishment and get the things that you need in your daily life. Sometimes doing something very simple can bring a lot of joy. Do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with it. The KISS principle.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
I think that applies. All right, I think our yeast is about ready, so we're going to stir it in. And are you ready to get your hands dirty?
Sure, let's get our hands
Cool.
dirty. Hands are washed and ready to go.
Now, the fun thing about simple recipes is that you can add on to them and individualize them. Is there anything that you would like to do to this particular recipe that make it special?
Maybe some spice. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe some Italian spice.
I think we have some Italian spice. So, there, have that.
It so happens to be right there. How much sugar we need to put in there?
As much as you like.
A good sprinkling.
A good amount, yeah. I want to taste it. All right.
And this will blend in with the dough as we need the dough.
All right.
I'm going to put it back where it starts.
I'm going to go ahead and pour in our yeast and water. And have at it, man.
With my hand.
With your hand. You want to take off your ring.
Here, you take my ring off. I got my other finger on your ring.
Oh, does this ever come off?
It doesn't come off very often, that's for sure.
All right.
And now this is at this time pretty soupy.
Yes.
Because I need it. It's going to become more thick and more doughy.
That is correct. And you can always add a little bit more flour, a little bit more water, depending on your individual tastes are. But the main thing is you want to get it all mixed up. You can use a mixture. I like using my hands.
To be honest with you, I've always used a mixer when I bake or cook, but kind of fun just getting in.
Yeah, it's fun to get in there.
It's kind of like being a kid again.
Yeah, so you want to make sure, do what Greg's doing and fold it in. Make sure you get all the pieces of flour all in there. Because the main thing you want to have is so it's all mixed so that the yeast can expand and do what it needs to do. You want to make sure that the salt gets evenly distributed. If there's too much salt in it, sometimes that can kill your yeast, so you want to be careful about that. Alright, that looks pretty good.
So yeast doesn't like salt?
Yeast doesn't like salt. It says the internet. So it must be.
If it's on the internet, it must be true, right? Look out.
There's my kitchen. Right. Look at that.
Did you get those for me to use on my hands?
I did.
That's good, because I'm going to need it.
Alright, so now
you
we're...
try to just get as much off your fingers as you can and just deal with the rest.
Yeah. And you'll be surprised how much it grows. Alright, so there we go. There you are, sir.
These.
And I'll go ahead and get you up here so you can rinse your hands off. So now what we want to do is we want to cover the dough, and we want to cover it for about 4 to 6 hours.
We don't have that long.
Oh no, but we're in luck. Because luckily, some Georgia Tech students have assembled a time machine just off
camera.
camera.
You'd have to use Tech students, wouldn't you?
Yep. Local plug. So, luckily they made a time machine. It's right over there, but there is one thing we have to do. You have to wear your time traveling device.
You want me to wear the gray one or the...
No, you can pick, you can pick.
All right. Do you
So-
go through our legs or...
No,
Oh,
no.
they go on our
Yeah,
heads.
you go on your head.
All right.
Now,
All right, here we go.
this is a critical part of time travel. I asked them
These are
about
like children's pajamas.
They're not true. Well,
Okay.
they're a critical
Just-
part
they
of
look like children.
They are, but they're a critical part of it because I asked them about it and they said, well, you know, it's part of the time traveling device and you won't understand the math, so we're not going to bother explaining it. So I just took the word.
Yeah, Tech's people are pretty smart.
So we'll just walk this way and
Walk this way.
walk through time.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so 5 hours later.
Man,
that was a rough time travel.
Rough trip.
All right, you can take
these
off. Yep, you can take your time traveling device.
We're not going to travel anymore?
No, keep it handy. We
Okay,
may need it. We
We
may
may
need it.
need it, okay.
So a few hours have passed, and we can see that our dough has risen. So we'll take a look.
Risen, that's kind of like, that's got a religious kind of
It
thing.
does. It does.
Should be
No
doing this
boulder
on
though.
Easter.
I should. May make it part 2. So there you can see it risen. And what Greg is going to do is he's going to coat his fist in flour so it doesn't stick, like that. And he's going to firmly but gently push down.
Right down through the center.
Right through the center. And you'll hear the air go out of it. And then you want to take your hand, you want to scoop it all and make it a ball again.
With the same hand?
Mm-hmm.
It's gooey.
It is a little gooey.
It's not a little gooey. It's a lot of gooey.
Better you than me.
But it does ball up. It does ball up real nicely in the
It
middle of the
does.
bowl.
You can see how the consistency changed. And again, if you want a more thick bread, you can add more flour. And another trick you can do right before you bake is you can roll it out. And that's how you make baguettes, is you roll it out with a rolling pin. And then
So
you
let me ask
roll
you
it
this,
up.
do we need to squash that down again and make sure there's,
If there's some more air in there, if you feel some air, you can push it down again.
how am I supposed to know if there's air in there?
It looks good.
Should
You'll feel it.
your professional eyes tell you there's no air?
I think it looks good.
All right, we're good then.
Because the main thing you're doing here is you're mixing up the yeast so it can eat the flour that hasn't been consumed yet and expand a bit more.
Good.
So it looks pretty good.
Okay,
And so now we're going to take our saran wrap, put it back over it.
okay. I'm gonna wash this off my hands. I have a feeling we're getting ready to go somewhere again.
We are. I think that's the Georgia Tech students calling us, telling us that our time lapse is almost ready. So with
Should
that,
have turned that off before we, there, I'll just use the same towel like before. All right, sorry about that.
no, it's quite all right, quite all right.
Oh, yeah,
All right,
yeah.
we're putting on our hats, and we know what that means. It's time to do the time warp.
Let's do the time warp again. All right, off we go. All right, we're back. Woo, that was a better trip than the last one.
I agree.
Great,
It's nauseous this time. All right, so let's
Right.
put our tam
We
travel
don't need
gear over
those
there.
again, do we?
We don't. We should
All
be
right,
good. All right, so our dough is ready, and the first thing we need to do is heat our or preheat our pan to match the oven, and it's a little slow right now, but you want to usually do it for 450. It should be fine. You just want to make sure it's not a cold pan when you put the dough in. That's the main thing. Yeah, it's good and hot. So we're going to take it out now. If you don't have a bread maker, using a Dutch oven is just as good. In fact, better, I think. I want to be careful because that is hot.
It's hot.
All right. So the first thing we're going to do is, and Greg, if you could grab that flour and without touching,
Just kind of
obviously,
sprinkle it in, or
just sprinkle it in.
kind of cover the,
And the idea is that the flour will keep the bread from sticking to
do
the
we
bottom.
need to throw some of it up on the side a little bit, or mostly just on the bottom?
You can try it on the side. It usually doesn't
Then
stay.
It's going to stay there.
Yeah. Now, Greg added some Italian herbs as a special way to individualize this loaf. And earlier, while we were time traveling, I roasted some garlic because that's another fun way to do things. So, roasting garlic is really easy. All you do is get some tin foil, get a head of garlic, and then cook it for about 40 minutes. And what you want to do is get enough. Greg, if you could open that.
I can do that.
Thank you. I'm going to take these little guys out and throw them in. So just give it that little extra something.
So you're taking the whole clove out, you're not cutting it?
Nope.
Okay.
Just going to throw it in. And you can do whatever however you want to do it. I like having a special bite once in a while. It
Mm-hmm.
lets you know it's there.
Surprise.
Yeah. Sometimes you can lose the garlic if you cut it up too much, but roasted garlic is always a nice thing to add. And
It's pretty cool, it comes out in one piece.
it does. So, and when you roast garlic, you always want to make sure that you take off as much of the skin as you can, so that...
Like when you press it, you can
Right.
just pull the skin
Right.
off when you do that.
And then you want to add a
But
lot
when
of
you
olive oil.
roast it, now it looks like you left the skin on it.
Right, so we leave some of the skin on it,
Okay.
enough just to hold it together,
Mhm.
but anything excess you want to take that out because it's going to make it hard to get out.
And it's segmented.
And then you
Okay.
just take little guys out, and make sure you cut the top off, not the bottom. And you want to leave a good amount of olive oil in there, and when you put it in the oven, make sure it's double wrapped, because what will happen is the olive oil will leak into your oven if you don't do that, and then you'll have a really nasty
I
smell.
wish we had some way to, because that really smells good.
Yeah, you can't go
Some
wrong
way to
with it.
share the.
All right. So, now, because this is my contribution, I'll go ahead and mix it. I'll wash my hands real quick. All right.
So you're just going to be kind of mixing those into there.
Yeah, we're just going to gently, we're just going to gently fold it in there. And we didn't take it right out of the oven because you really don't want to put the super hot garlic cloves
Can
into
they
the
be
dough.
cold after they've been roasted, or were they still kind of warm?
They're still kind of warm, so you can have one if you want.
Oh, no, I'm good.
So we got them all folded in there. All right, and now we're going to take our dough and very gently, and this is critical, do not touch the pan, even if it's only been out for a little bit, because it is hot. Now this is another important thing we're going to do. We're going to take some water. Because the way that you cook bread without a bread machine is with steam. So we're going to fill up a little bit of water, about half a cup, and we're not going to use all of it. And we're going to dribble it around the sides.
Ooh, okay.
Like that. So we only used about maybe a quarter of a cup. And then, and this is very important. If your hands are wet, make sure that the water doesn't soak through your mitten. Otherwise, you're going to get a nasty burn if that top is still hot.
Good point.
All
That's
right.
a steam thing.
All right. Let's throw this in there. Now, we're going to put this in there for about 30 minutes on time. And due to our limited budget, we're not going to time travel again because it takes up too much energy. But we're just going to wait 30 minutes, so we'll see you in 30 minutes. All right, so it's been 10 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and take it out. There we are. And again, if you want the super golden baguette look, then an egg wash is probably your best bet. We didn't do that today. And we are ready. We're going to use our spatula. Put that there. Alright. And there we have our bread. I usually want to wait for maybe about 5 minutes to cool off, but I think we can go ahead and cut it and have some butter. Do you take butter?
I love butter. You got love butter.
Alright.
From the South, everybody eats butter.
Yeah. Alright, there you go for butter.
All right.
And then I'll get the bread knife. And we'll take this.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Nice and soft. So I hope you try this recipe, and I hope you share it with someone that you may disagree with on some things, but hopefully you'll agree that fresh bread is always tasty. Thanks for watching Recipe of Love. And I hope you join us next time.